for the Wellness Center. And the Wellness Education and Health Promotion Program, or Wellness Center for short, because that's quite a mouthful, is an office on campus. We're located in the old gym building, room 007. If you're ever on campus ever again, who knows when that'll happen. But basically, our purpose and our mission is to foster a culture of health and wellness on campus. And we do that by hosting workshops and events like these in order to empower and inform students to make healthy decisions. So today, we're obviously going to talk about gut health, and no one is better to cover this topic than an actual registered dietitian. But Dina, she's amazing. She also works on campus when it's open. And I cannot speak any more highly of her. I've been seeing her for I think well over 2 years now. And I look forward to our bi-weekly appointments. So without further ado, please welcome Dina, and you can begin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. And if you cannot hear and see me, obviously, put something in the chat there that you're having any issues audio wise. But I am very excited to be asked back. And thank you. Like Nicole said, I am part of Lehman College, both on campus and off campus at this point. So some of you might know me already, and I'll introduce myself here in this next slide, that this is me. I am Dina D'Alessandro. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, sometimes called an RD or a dietitian or a nutritionist. And what I do in my day-to-day world is a variety of different things. I don't really follow a particular traditional full-time job. And so for anybody who is watching this, if you are in the health and wellness world, this is kind of interesting to know that you can, if you want to, you can cobble together a bunch of different things to allow you to pursue a career doing what you love. So I have my own private practice. As Nicole was just mentioning, I technically, I guess, still am the on-campus dietitian for the Lehman Student Health Center, but ever since we shut down campus and moved off-site, that position is kind of pending right now. So I'm taking in students from Lehman College and seeing them through my private practice for a very, very discounted price, and that's for the time being. Unfortunately, I cannot do that for free at this point because it's been, going on to 2 years now, and Mama needs to pay her bill. So I apologize for having you guys having to foot the bill there. But we can talk about that after the fact if anybody needs my services. I also used to be a prenatal dietitian. I used to work at a high-risk OBGYN office in Midtown Manhattan, and I would see women who were newly pregnant and or dealing with pregnancy issues and or were diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And so I would help them make sure that they are maintaining their health and wellness during their pregnancy. And that was obviously very important, not just for them, but also for their babies as well. And then I also am an independent contractor. And what that means is that I provide my services to whomever needs it. So I secure particular positions with companies and clients that I invoice, right? So they hire me on an as needed basis, case by case, hour by hour, day by day. And I do both corporate and community wellness events and programs for them. So as an example, sometimes I'll attend it used to be in person. Nowadays, it's a virtual health fair. So a company has a health fair and they want to have a dietitian plug in and talk about, healthy eating during the workday, or people who might be traveling salespeople, what you can do to make sure that you're having better quality foods while you're traveling out there. And in the corporate wellness world, I do things like facilitate weekly work groups with people who have been diagnosed with diabetes or other conditions. And we walk through every single week, and I provide them with information on how to manage their condition, or at least help them slow down the progress of it becoming worse. In Lehman College, so just a little bit more about me, I'm a second career dietitian. So I started off in my previous life with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication way back in the early 1800s when I first went to school a long time ago. And then in about, 8 years ago or so, I decided I wanted to venture off into the wellness world and specifically into nutrition. And I learned a little bit more about what that means. And so I ended up enrolling in Lehman College's didactic program for dietetics through the health sciences department. And they have a dietetics, food, and nutrition degree. And so I was working my way towards that degree. It ended up becoming a Master of Science in Nutrition when all was said and done. But I also did my dietetic internship at Lehman College as well, where for an entire year, I was working in a volunteer role, but in an internship role nonetheless, in a variety of different settings like nursing homes and long-term care, hospitals, community wellness, WIC centers. And for an entire year, we get our experience doing that. And then it all culminates with a very, very hard, difficult national exam. Once we take that exam, we are then credentialed as dietitians. So becoming a registered dietitian takes a lot of effort and energy. So for anyone out there who is currently doing that, or if you're pursuing a career in health and wellness and a degree, and it comes with all these other things with it, like exams and certifications, my heart does go out to you because it is very time consuming, but it is ultimately, hopefully, very worth it. And as I said before too, when the campus was open, I was also the campus dietitian. That is currently not a position anymore. It's kind of on hold until further notice. And then I also, about a year and a half ago, they during the pandemic, a lot of people obviously shut down their programs, one in which was the Swedish Institute. They used to have a personal training program. So I was the lecturer on campus for them. And they also do things like home health aides and massage therapists, and they have a variety of different wellness degrees in that as well. So lots of different things. I've cobbled together quite a lot of different things. I don't love doing anything full-time or one thing at all. So I try to do a million different things instead. And as an adjunct lecturer as well at Lehman College, I teach now. I've been teaching for about 3.5 years in the undergrad and graduate nutrition department in the courses there. So I'm really excited that I am very loyal to Lehman College. It's kind of like once I set foot on campus, both figuratively and literally, I have never left there. So it's very near and dear to my heart as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to do a little bit of everything in this conversation. So I'll share with you first, when we talk about the gut, I'll explain a little bit about what that means. Obviously, we are all in college, so this might be a little bit higher level than if I were just sharing general information to the general population who I might need to simplify some things. So bear with me as I get a little sciencey in the slides to come. And then I will talk a little bit too about what this means, how you can support your gut health with food and other lifestyle factors that are involved. And I do have time at the end. This is going to be about maybe 40 minutes or so, since we're blocked for a whole hour. We'll have time at the end for Q&A, but by all means, feel free to enter into the chat box any questions that you have. I'll make sure that I stop along the way just to double check and see if anybody has any questions. And then of course, like I said, when we have a more official Q&A session at the end of this discussion, you can open up your mics and we can chat a little bit more in detail. So I hope you find this very interesting. So to begin, I'm going to take you on the journey of what this means, what the gut even is. Your gut, your gastrointestinal tract, quite literally runs, as I say, from mouth to south. It's about 30 feet of a tube that stops along the way, and it does a variety of different things, and there's a lot of twists and turns. So at the very top of our body here in the oral cavity, eating and drinking, this is what's known as ingestion. Just the mere fact of putting food, drink, medicine in your mouth, chewing, swallowing, that activity, this is ingesting. So you have the oral cavity and down into the esophagus. That's just part of the top part of your gut health function, or your gut function. Then we move into more of a physical or a mechanical process called digestion. And this is just the mere act of your teeth grinding, right? That act of chewing, the act of your salivary glands, the saliva coming in and kind of wetting everything up and making things a little bit damper to be able to soften the food that is in your mouth. And then as the food travels down your GI tract through the esophagus into your stomach, it's what I call the washing machine. So your stomach ends up churning up all that food, and it also takes in some different kinds of things like acids are involved to break that food down to make it easier for you to digest that food. We also have chemical digestion involved as well. And I promise you, there is not an exam at the end of this, but there is chemical digestion as well. So you have a variety of hormones, enzymes, and accessory organs that are involved from this whole process, from literally the mouth to your stomach to your rectum, where all of these things are breaking down those food items or anything that you're ingesting further and further, breaking that stuff down and sending it off to where it needs to go. So as you can see here, you have hormones that are in your pancreas, in your stomach, in your small intestine. You have a variety of enzymes that start in your mouth, in your salivary glands, breaking things down and making sure that those things are easier to process. Pancreas, stomach, and small intestine also have enzymes involved too. And then we have the accessory organs like bile that is produced in your gallbladder and stored in your liver, or vice versa, I should say. And that also is injected into that whole system too, to further break down in that chemical process of digesting food. Then we go into absorption. So now that your food has taken that whole trip from your mouth to your stomach, past your stomach, it's going to start getting processed even further in the small intestine and somewhat in the large intestine too. So in the small intestine, your food is being broken down from larger molecules to smaller molecules, and it's finding its way into a variety of different things. Like your small intestine has cells, and these cells have little protuberances called villi and microvilli. And as you can see in that yellow section, the small intestine, it really wraps around and winds around to create as much surface area as possible to really further break down all those foods and send them into where they need to go through blood cells, and making sure that this will then create whatever function that your body needs for these things to perform. Your large intestine, it does a job too. We have some vitamins that are being made in that lower area in the large intestine. And this is also where the process of elimination comes in too, as I'm about to talk about here. So dietitians, healthcare providers, we love talking about poop. Poop is very important to make sure that your body is processing things and then eliminating things. So in the gut function here, at the very bottom, we have the large intestine, the rectum, and the anus, and anything that is not digested at that point, like fibrous things and some even red blood cells, those things will come out and be excreted. We excrete throughout our body, right? When we're running around, we're breathing, we're exhaling, that vapor that's coming out, we're sweating. Again, that water is being excreted. We also have urinary excretion too, which goes through a different system through our kidneys, and that is excretion as well. So not everything can stay inside of us, otherwise we could become somewhat toxic. So we want to make sure that we have the ability to excrete. And so these are the functions of your gut, that 30-foot tube that goes along the whole length of your system. This here, which I like to share, again, not for any crazy purposes. I don't expect anybody to even be able to read what's on there, but I really think it's so interesting because this helps us understand that if we do have issues with our gut, if for some reason we're not able to properly absorb food, absorb those molecules that are being broken down, or if we've had surgery in our intestine, or we've had some sort of illness that is stopping things from functioning properly, we have a variety of different chemicals, vitamins, minerals, etc., that are being absorbed along the sites of our gastrointestinal tract that can be thrown off. So you could end up with either a buildup of something happening, which makes you toxic, right? That's toxicity, or a depletion or a deficiency of something. So you can be deficient in a certain vitamin or mineral if your gut isn't working. So it's really important to make sure that as much as you possibly can, to make sure that you are creating a healthy environment for your gut. So as you might have seen in that first slide, we talk about two brains, our two brains. And what we've come to learn is that we do have what we call a bi-directional communication transformation system between our gut and our brain. So if you've ever heard the terms of, I need to do a gut check, or I had a gut feeling that something was off about that, this is because we really do end up seeing that there is a communication process between our brain in our head and our brain, our quote unquote brain in our gut. And the bidirectionality of that means that there are links that can happen, that if we're not processing things properly, if our brain is feeling super foggy, if we're getting very stressed out over something, if we're having some sort of cognitive issues happen, it can then directly affect how we are digesting and absorbing food and creating those chemical reactions in our gut. It can affect that, and vice versa. If we're having issues in our lower GI, in our gut, if we're having gastrointestinal issues, diseases, any kind of things that are causing it to be imbalanced, it can then affect your ability to process information, your ability to think clearly. So again, really understanding that the body in itself is very interrelated, and seeing how these items like your gut microbiota, which are the little, as I call them, the little bugs in your gut, the bacteria in your gut that helps all of these things function, how that influences all of these interactions and reactions. So there's a true link in there. Again, the image on the right is just showing how our past theories before research was done on this, what we used to think that these things were not necessarily related. We would think, oh, that's a psycho issue, that's a behavioral issue. But now we're realizing that microbiota, the little good gut bugs that you have, the bacteria in your gut, and that brain can really be interrelated in that way. So I'm going to share with you some gut health disorders. This may or may not be things that you've heard of before, quite a variety of things. This is not an exhaustive list, but perhaps you or someone you know have been diagnosed with things like acid reflux, candida, celiac disease, constipation, diverticulitis, gallstones, H. pylori, which is the issue that we have when we have ulcers, stomach ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, ulcerative colitis. All of these things are happening through, again, from mouth to south, through any part of this whole GI region. Some of these things are more restricted to the upper GI. Some of these things are more restricted to the lower GI, but quite a variety of things can really happen. And any one of these diseases or conditions or states, if they're not properly treated, or even properly diagnosed and then properly managed, could definitely throw off a lot of things. Again, can cause deficiencies, toxicities, or create dysfunction in the rest of our body and brain, that brain axis as well. So in my world as a dietitian, we implement what is called medical nutrition therapy. This is basically us teaching people who have been diagnosed with certain conditions, in this case, gut-related issues, teaching them how to eat to support the health of their condition or to reduce the risk of something happening even worse down the line. So we want to make sure that we're slowing the issue or correcting it or curing it if we can. So on some of the bulleted items that I listed here as examples, we have things like if you're constipated, you might be told to increase your fiber intake, but also increase your fluid intake to get things loosened up a little bit and running. On the opposite spectrum, if you have diarrhea where things are a little too loose, we might be telling you to slow down on certain things like fiber and also sugary types of foods as well. Not actual sugar foods, but things that can break down into smaller sugar molecules like refined carbohydrates. If you are recovering from issues like esophageal surgery, cancer, bariatric issues, or if you have an ostomy, meaning if you are given a bag to help you with excreting and eliminating your fluids from the inside, we might end up applying modified textures because you can't chew and swallow if your gut really isn't working well. So you might be given pureed foods or softened foods or soups, whether it's for a limited time or for a little bit longer, depending on how long you are suffering or trying to manage that particular condition. We also have remedies and management for fat-related issues. So if you have gallbladder removal, if you're dealing with pancreatitis, if you have what's called short bowel syndrome, or if you are recovering post-operation from bariatric surgery, we're going to restrict fat intake because your gut is not working properly enough to help you with absorbing all of that fat. And so we might put you on a restricted diet, making sure that you're eating low fat foods so that you don't end up having any issues that are very unpleasant and somewhat uncomfortable too. You also have gut related immune issues, autoimmune diseases like celiac disease and some allergies are related to the gut. Whether you end up feeling like you have a restricted breathing way, or you find that you get breakouts, or your lips are swollen, or if we're not necessarily in a life-threatening way, if we have something like an intolerance, we may eliminate certain things. Or if you have an actual known allergy, you'll be living lifelong without that particular food because it is destroying the cells within your body because your body is reacting violently against that particular thing. So for those of you who have heard of or have been diagnosed with or know someone diagnosed with a dairy allergy or celiac disease, they will have a lifelong avoidance of dairy, milk, animal products in that respect, or gluten-free diet from that point forward. Again, that second to last bullet, similar to what I was saying before too, if we have some issues that might not necessarily be as serious, somewhat accommodating in different ways, where we have bowel issues or ostomies, we might also implement things like slow, frequent meals, avoiding things that potentially could trigger any kind of symptom or situation that might feel a little bit worse, where we are like things like acidic foods, spicy foods, things that are going to cause us to have a reaction in that way. And then last but not least this is specifically related to irritable bowel syndrome. So irritable bowel syndrome in itself is a condition that is known as a rule out condition, meaning that if you can't figure out what's going on, you're having tummy trouble constantly, your doctor might put you through some tests to rule out other more serious conditions. And then so by default, by ruling out everything else, you will then be diagnosed with instead something called irritable bowel syndrome. And the way that we manage that nowadays, it has to be monitored through both your doctor probably and also a dietitian, because it can be somewhat restrictive, is we put you on an elimination and reintroduction diet by diminishing what are known as FODMAP foods. FODMAP foods, this is just a very long fancy name for carbohydrates that kind of ferment in your gut. Technically, all carbohydrates ferment in some way. That is a natural process of what they do. That's why we feel kind of bloated or maybe a little gassy when we eat certain foods. But there are definitely foods that are higher up on that level, more higher FODMAP and lower FODMAP foods. And so we kind of take them out and see, in the course of 3 weeks or so, are you feeling any better? If we reintroduce, do those symptoms appear again? If so, then we know that that might be an issue that you might want to avoid that particular food or accommodate it in some way, either by taking, an enzyme or something that might help you process that food. Next up here, as far as gut repair, so if you have had issues with your gut, if you are looking to maybe specialize, if you're in the health and wellness world, if you're looking to specialize in things with the GI issues and so on, there are a lot of things that are coming up, very interesting stuff that we're learning in research that I wanted to share with everybody here too. So please bear with me as I nerd out for a bit. As we've come to learn, the gut is a very healthy environment and there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So even with pregnancies, for babies who are born vaginally, as they're descending down through the vaginal canal, there's actually flora. So there's good bacteria being placed on them that helps reduce the risk of things like allergies and chronic diseases as they age. If they are C-section babies, which happens, right? Sometimes we have complications in births and we'll have to end up delivering babies through C-sections, cesarean sections. That is not going through the vaginal canal. So the baby's not getting that immune system built up in there. So I have seen some research, this is a little bit conflicting right now, that there is something called either swabbing or seeding, meaning that a cloth is placed in the vaginal canal of the birth mom and that it is removed and then swabbed on the child to kind of like put that flora on the baby so that there is at least something on there that they're getting as a process of helping them support and strengthen their immune system. Again, still kind of in its, no pun intended, infancy stages. So I don't know too much about this just yet. We also know that there's supplementation, which I'll talk a little bit about that too coming up, micronutrient supplementation. And when we utilize the word supplements, like when we talk about vitamin and mineral supplements, things that you're buying in bottles at a pharmacy or at a health food store, you are filling the gaps within your diet, right? It's supplementing the other foods. So as I mentioned before, you might have some gut issues. There's some disrepair that's going on there. You can't quite heal properly, or there's a surgery that's happening or an illness that's happening, and your body's not absorbing the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that it needs. And so you might be given supplementation for that time, and it could be lifelong, but for that time, just to make sure that you're getting enough of what you need because your body is unable to do it on its own. So there's some dietary gaps that are being filled in there. There could also be issues though with that, with medical or medication interactions. Not everything plays nicely together. So again, I tend to tell people, don't just always go to the store and like pick up a variety of different multivitamins or different kinds of like iron pills, because you don't know how they might be reacting to things that you're already taking, or if you even need some of this stuff, because your body sometimes will excrete or build up if you have an excess of what your body needs. So be careful with just taking it on your own to get those supplements in there. Fecal transplant. Okay, this is huge. So anybody who's ever suffered from C. diff, C. difficile, which is a very, very deadly bacterial infection in the lower gut where you potentially could die. So this is something that I'm learning too, where you actually take, because we were talking about feces and the lower gut, you actually take the bacteria from another human's fecal matter. It is processed in a lab through some sort of pill, and you implement that into the person whose bacterial population in their gut is completely screwed up. So they actually have a fecal transplant. You're kind of like populating the pool of good bacteria where none exists right now. So these are in kind of extreme cases. Again, a lot of new research is being done on this. I actually have a story from my sister-in-law who went into the hospital for her intestine. She had to get about 1.5 feet of her intestine removed due to diverticulitis. So this is a condition that caused her to be inflamed and was causing a lot of issues there. Contracted C. difficile, which is usually the case. It is a hospital specific illness that sometimes happens when things are not being sterilized properly. Contracted C. difficile and ended up getting a fecal transplant from her brother, my boyfriend. So very interesting. And now she's healed. A few years later, she's actually able to, move around and not have to worry about wearing diapers or soiling herself, which was really unfortunate, very uncomfortable. And as you can imagine, quite embarrassing too, to have to deal with something like that. So what are the workarounds? How do you maintain a healthy gut right now? I'm going to share with you in the coming slides. We talk about things like prebiotics and probiotics and foods that contain fiber. So as a general rule, when we look at recommendations of what you should be eating in the course of a day, the dietary guidelines for healthy Americans recommends about 25 grams of fiber a day for females and 38 grams of fiber a day for males. And we know that not a lot of people are getting the proper amounts of fiber. Unfortunately, we're a very fiber deficient population here. In fact, let me stop here for 1 second. I'm just going to scroll through. I see some of the things coming in chat. Nicole, can't give up cheese even though lactose intolerant. Yes, I agree with you. There are workarounds. You can take like Lactaid, or sometimes people will have better reactions to what are called fermented dairy products. So some yogurts and some cheeses they've undergone a particular process. So it's not as sensitive when you're eating that. So you could probably do pretty well with certain lactose containing foods like dairy products. Yvette says currently exploring dairy-free cheeses. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, anything that's going to be replacing something in a processed item, right? Something that is made to look like another food might also cause some gut issues because, again, is your body tolerating all of the other synthetic items that might be put together to cobble together to make like it's cheese, right? So in the lab and food manufacturing world, they're developing cheeses that are going to melt. They're developing burgers that bleed, right? They're trying to implement plant-based alternatives for people who do have issues with other things like these animal products. Yeah, exactly. What is the impact on the immune system, GI tract overall? Joy Allison says, when you continue to eat foods that cause allergies. Joy, this is a really important thing to keep in mind. So if you have been diagnosed, which a lot of people sometimes throughout their lives might have allergies come and go, right? Like there might be a seasonal thing. And then when you're of a certain age and you hit a certain life cycle, that kind of goes away. Or you might have had no allergies and all of a sudden when you're 20 years old, you're allergic to shrimp. It's kind of rare that happens in adulthood. But the point is that when we're talking about the GI tract, we're talking about a very sensitive type of lining. And these cells, these epithelial cells, they regenerate very quickly. So just as a comparison here, you're talking about cells in your GI turn over, right? They renew every 5 to 7 days or so, so about a week. If I were to give you in a comparison to like your red blood cells come and go every like 3 or 4 months. So 120 days, your red blood cells come and go, which is why if you ever have a blood test done and something wonky happens like high cholesterol or diabetes, your doctor might say, come back in 3 months and do another blood test, right? Because in 3 months, your blood cells have renewed. So what I'm getting at here with this GI issue is that if you have been diagnosed with a known food allergy, even if you're not necessarily suffering the consequences, like if your symptoms and reactions are kind of subdued. So as an example, like I mentioned before, if you have celiac disease, but you're like, oh, listen, I love bread. And when I eat wheat, like I don't really feel any issues. So I'm just going to keep taking that in. But what happens is your body is internally, it's knowing that there's an issue. So by having anything that is causing an allergic response internally, even if you can't physically feel it or outwardly see it, it is causing those microvilli to be flattened down and those epithelial cells to be somewhat toxic in that way. And because we have such a high turnover in our gut, one cell very quickly can replicate, one diseased cell can very quickly replicate into another and another and another. So gastroesophageal and stomach and lower intestine, like your whole GI is very susceptible to cancer because of that. So if you're constantly, even something like drinking very, very hot, like high temperatures, beverages can cause esophageal cancer because you're damaging a small part of your cells, but it's replicating so fast before you even know what's happening, and boom, you're ending up with some sort of cancer. So I would very much encourage people, if you have been diagnosed with an allergy, to remain lifelong avoidance of that, or find an alternative that could potentially be accommodating. So again, with celiac disease, you can't eat wheat or wheat bread or wheat products, but you could eat like rice-based things, or other types of grains might be, a little bit easier to digest. So thank you so much for your question on that. Prebiotics and probiotics, I'm going to share with you coming up in a sec. And to clarify, the gut, as I mentioned in the very beginning, it's quite literally the tube that goes from your mouth all the way down to your rectum, so to your anus. So it's about a 30-foot length of tube that has a variety of twists and turns. Midway it stops, there's a stomach going on there, then it goes into your small intestine, your large intestine, and out the pooper. So quite literally an entire tube from mouth to south, as I like to say. So that is your gastrointestinal tract, also known as the gut. When we talk about things like, I have a gut feeling, it's actually more like your small and large intestine. So on the lower GI is where we can say the gut is. There's different nerve endings and hormones and things that take place in that region of your GI tract, which are more related to like your brain. So when we said we have gut reactions or that gut brain axis, we're really talking about the lower GI. Yeah, so Priscilla, I'm going to share with you in a sec. I'm going to share exactly that in a second with how do you know you're getting fiber I'm going to share in the slides coming up exactly how you can prepare for that. And I'm realizing we're at the 1:40 mark. So I'm going to go through the next few slides and I'll stop for more questions. So we'll talk here first about prebiotics, right? So what is the definition of prebiotics? These are non-digestible carbohydrates, right? So we have macronutrients, 3 macronutrients in the foods that we eat: carbs, fats, and protein. So in the carbohydrates, we have fiber that comes out of, usually the plant-based foods that you see, the stringy stuff that you can't really chew and swallow. Those are non-digestible. But what they do is they help stimulate the growth of beneficial bacteria in your gut. So pre is the precursor, right? It's almost like they're feeding the good bacteria in your gut. I keep calling them bugs. Technically, when you see them under micro, slides, they do look like they're creepy crawlies. So that's the food. You're feeding the food for them. And the prebiotics are actually found in foods that already exist. So this is going to be found in things that are high fiber foods, like what you see here. So quite literally, any type of produce that you can imagine, any plant type of food will contain prebiotics. Some are a little bit higher on the fibrous scale than others, which means they have a little bit more fiber to them. So whoever asked me about how do you know how much you're getting, beans, peas, legumes, right? Chickpeas, nuts, those are the highest containing fibrous foods, but they also can cause a little bit of gastro discomfort. Like you're definitely going to feel kind of bloated and gassy. So we recommend trying to integrate a variety, like diversify your whole diet so that you're always including a little bit of everything in there. So your bugs, your gut bugs are eating, you're feeling good about all that stuff. The darker the color, the higher the fiber too. So, a white type of lettuce like Boston lettuce or iceberg lettuce won't contain as much fiber. It'll have a little bit more water content, but not as much fiber as a really dark leafy green like kale or collard greens. So again, right, we have a variety of different produce things when you're going shopping. Just integrate as much as you can into all of your meals throughout the day. Nuts and seeds as well. Here we have the probiotics. So this is the stuff that if you can't get it through food, this is the stuff that's kind of like in other things. They're live bacteria. So if you think of the medicine, right? Antibiotics meaning anti, against, they kill the bacteria that is causing you to be sick. If you have urinary tract infection or any kind of bacterial infection, you're going to take antibiotics to kill those bacteria, but they're also kind of killing other bacteria too, unfortunately. So we add in the probiotic foods. Pro is the opposite of anti. So the stuff that we're kind of killing off, we're building back up there. And the live bacteria that can be found in some of your foods are things like in yogurts, kefir, kombucha. These are live organisms that can build up your bacterial population as well. So as you can see on the slide here, they actually help improve or maintain the natural balance. They can also be found in supplement form. So you could take live probiotics, you can take them in pill or liquid, you can find them in bottles or in the refrigerated section in your health food stores. But the issue with this, much like a lot of supplements, is they're not very well regulated. So you never really know what else is maybe in those pills or those supplemental forms. They're also very sensitive to heat and moisture and exposure to things. They vary greatly by brand. I don't think I have any recommendations as far as brands are concerned, but I'm happy to get back to anybody if you're interested in that. Again, the issue is try to get your biotics from food. And these are the supplemental stuff. And the last thing on this bullet list is there's no way of knowing exactly what kind of bacteria you need. Your population is like all over the place and it changes when you age. So as a baby, you have different bacteria in your gut, different strains and different kinds of types of bacteria that are in there. And as you age, it decreases and it changes up a little bit. So unless you really go in for some kind of very specific gut bacteria testing, you won't really know what you need. So to buy things off the shelf or in a refrigerator, or to buy things online if they're being sold, like, build up the good gut bacteria, you won't really know if the stuff that you're taking, like if you're taking lactobacillus, you might have enough lactobacillus in your gut. So it might kind of be a waste of time and money, unfortunately. So again, just being conscientious. And again, as I mentioned, right, the prebiotics, we said that was all just like your natural whole produce foods, everything you can possibly think of as you're shopping in the supermarket. That all has prebiotics already in them. The probiotic foods are more manufactured. So you have things like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, any fermented type of food, kimchi, tempeh, kombucha, which is the drinkable product. Just be really careful, because much like I said with the beans and the fiber that are in our foods, it can cause a lot of gut distress. So you don't want to be overdoing, like quite literally a forkful of kimchi a day is enough to help you populate your gut when it comes to the probiotics that you need, and the rest of the stuff you can get in the prebiotic or your fibrous foods. So let me stop here for one sec, go into the chat. Let me just take a look. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, Priscilla. Yeah, okay, so I think I've kind of answered that right now, right? But so Priscilla, honestly, the only way you'll know is if you're like tracking stuff, if you're looking at bottles or packaged foods, or if you're going online and looking up, tell me the nutritional analysis of a can of beans, or of kale, or of nuts, or whatever. And then you can see how much fiber is in each one of those things. So what I tend to tell people is whatever you're making, like whatever your meal you're making, try to add in about 3 to 7 grams of fiber in every meal that you're having. And as you're eating, say 3 to 5 meals or whatever snacks in the course of the day, you'll probably get close to 28 grams at the end of it, or whatever you need to, 20 or 30 grams at the end of your day. You'll have enough of it. If you concentrate everything in one meal, your stomach is not going to love you. So I tend to say, throw a little bit of everything, right? You have a salad, throw in some seeds. You have your meal at night with your dinner, maybe have a side of beans. So a little bit of everything as you're going over the course of the day, you'll probably be spot on, unless you feel like doing some sort of, food tracking on an app or something like that. But let's talk a little bit about gut busters. As much as I am a huge fan and proponent of food freedom, meaning all foods fit, you want a cookie, have a cookie, you want a fried shrimp, have a fried shrimp. The patterns that are forming in your day-to-day food intake, what you're eating every day, all the time, especially leading up right now to holidays, if that continues, like I've had it one day for the meal and I'm having it the next day for leftovers, and the week after I'm having another holiday, these things again can kind of build up in your system too and throw off your gut health. That throws off that symbiosis, that nice balance that's going on. So we're talking about things that are highly processed foods. So as an example, what's a highly processed food? A very non-processed food would be corn, right? Corn on the cob, taken off of the stalk. I'm eating it like this. That's not processed at all. Once I take the kernels off and I put it in a can and I heat the can and I stick it in, some sort of processing center, and then I go shopping for a can of corn, that has been a little bit more processed, maybe not as high in nutritional value as just the plain natural whole corn on the cob. On the end of the spectrum, very highly processed would be like a corn chip, right? Like a Frito or something that you're getting out of a bag, like a snack bag, a corn chip. So that would be a highly processed food. Again, everything has its place. You want to have a bag of those once in a while, that's fine. But if this is something that you're intaking every single day, that can really throw off your gut. So things like highly processed foods, a lot of refined, those what we call like the white refined sugar products, sweets and treats. Listen, I have a sweet tooth like nobody's business, but I try to be conscientious because I want to make sure I'm not doing a disservice to my tummy and to my blood sugar levels as well. We also see sometimes too a high intake of meat. So a lot of consumption of red meat. Again, it can depend too on how that food is cooked. So maybe it's grilled and charred, and there's a lot of like burned parts on it too. That can be somewhat what we call carcinogenic. So that can also play a role in cancer causing issues in your gut. High fat and fried foods, as you can see here too, if that's something that you eat every single day, that can throw off your gut too. Alcohol consumption, again, if you're moderate, what we usually say in moderation is the equivalent of either 1 beer or about 4 or 5 ounces of wine in a glass, or I think like a 2-ounce little shot, right? Like a little shot glass of something. So that's like a moderate type of alcohol consumption every day for a week. So if you don't drink alcohol, I really encourage you, don't start. If you are drinking alcohol, I'd encourage you to take a look at how much are you taking in. If you're the type of person that just waits for special occasions and then you're like, pounding it, be very careful, not just for your hangover, but also what it's doing to your tummy. And then refined foods. So just like I said before with sweets and treats, with the sugar type of thing, if we're getting rid of that fibrous part of the food. So as an example, if I'm eating brown rice or whole wheat bread versus white rice and white bread, a very large consistent pattern of that over the course of the week and what I'm getting in my meals can also disrupt my gut a little bit. But so can non-food things. Stress. Hello, we live in a pandemic. Who's not stressed right now? Smoking. One of the best things I've ever done in my life was to quit smoking. I was smoking for 23 years, and I'm now about 11 years smoke free, but I'm still feeling the after effects of it as far as my cardiorespiratory condition is concerned. So things like this, if you can maintain a balance of self-care, if you can make sure that you're managing your schedule, if you don't overdo stuff, if you ask for help, if you set boundaries, if you are also making sure, try to move around as much as possible, right? Right now, this is like 6 hours, 9 hours today. I'm going to be sitting in front of a computer, but in between everything, and on times where I'm not an active participant, like if I'm just a meeting attendee, I'll turn my video off and I'll get up and I'll put my wireless earphones in and earbuds in, and I'll just walk around. Or in between things, I'll make sure I'm going for a walk around the block or doing some sort of cardio-respiratory movement just to make sure that I'm not sitting still. Antibiotic exposure. So much like I said before, right? Antibiotics and probiotics. So if you're constantly sick, if you're having a lot of these bacterial infections, if you're always on these antibiotic regimens, they're going to keep destroying the good gut bacteria too. So be conscientious of how much you're always on these things, and if there are other ways that you could possibly manage a condition without having to constantly take antibiotics. Proper hygiene, but almost too much hygiene, right? So last year we were all freaking out. Make sure you're washing your hands, sing happy birthday. Yes, for sure. But you don't want to be covering yourself in like antibacterial, moisturizers and constantly cleaning and wiping every single surface, because there is something about like the dirt exposure factor. Being able to be a little bit dirty is kind of okay. We also teach new moms, new parents, that it's okay for your kid to kind of like touch and eat certain things because we want to help strengthen and build up their immune system. Sometimes you need to be a little bit dirty and not be super, super sanitary or super hygienic. Again, within reason. Obviously, if you have a specific immunocompromised condition where you don't want contamination to happen, obviously that's going to be a different state of affairs there. Okay, so let me see what more time is on here. So putting this all together, and then I'm going to jump into the chat and answer other questions. Putting this all together, what does this mean? Do you have to have a perfect, quote unquote, clean diet? Absolutely not. As I said, food freedom, eat what you like, but try your best, if you can think of it, in a percentage of what your meals are. And I'm assuming you eat regularly through the day. I would probably say 80% of any given day or week should be somewhat spot on. Okay, so you're looking at something like this, a variety of fruits and vegetables. If you can have dairy, cool, have dairy, because that has calcium and other things that you might want. If you don't want to, if you're vegetarian, vegan, you have allergies, totally fine. You can get your minerals and vitamins elsewhere. Move around as much as you possibly can. Try to aim for about 30 minutes of physical activity. And we're talking moderate intensity, like get that heart rate up, get that breathing going, get that blood going, moving. Engage in self-care as often as you possibly can. And please try to limit or completely avoid smoking or alcohol intake 80% of the time. 20% of the time, whatever, margaritas, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, whatever you want. Okay, 20% of your time you can be kind of a little off kilter, and 80% of your time try to be somewhat spot on to make sure that you're managing and creating an optimal health environment specifically for your gut, because that's really what it's all about. So let me stop here now that I'm done with all my chatter, and let's take a look at what you guys have to say. Let me take a look here upon. Okay, so Joy, I think I answered all of your questions right now, if I'm not mistaken. Priscilla, I think at this point I answered yours as well. You're welcome. You're welcome. Joy, so the fiber supplements, like I said, not a problem, but anytime you're supplementing anything, you're giving your body something that you're not getting through normal, natural, whole food. So I would always opt for the whole food first, get it from your food first. Fiber supplements, again, could be okay, but they might end up making you a little bit more constipated. So as a general rule, and this goes for anybody too, if you are increasing your fiber consumption, whether it's through food or supplements, always increase your fluid. Otherwise, you will be constipated and not happy at all. So make sure you're constantly drinking, or not constantly, but drinking throughout the day. I would say probably, whatever, 2 liters, about a gallon-ish of water throughout the day, give or take. You don't have to be crazy about it. A lot of foods like fruits, as I said, some like your watery types of produce, that's going to have water in it. It's going to have fluids in it. If you make soups, if you drink tea, that's going to count as water. So you don't have to constantly be chugging just pure plain water all the time. Just stay hydrated so that fiber doesn't just stay put and give you stomach upset. Let's take a look. Frozen vegetables, Priscilla, I am a huge fan. So again, with the hierarchy of nutritional value, right? With the whole food, fresh picked out of the farm, yum, 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 right? High nutritional value. On the other end of the spectrum, we have either more processed types of food. So, not necessarily frozen, but I would say canned vegetables might have a lot of salt. They might have a lot of other kind of like synthetic chemicals in there to make them stay shelf stable. So just take a look at the ingredients, make sure there's not a lot of other stuff in it. It's just like, water and green beans and that's it. Frozen veggies, I'm a huge fan of, frozen fruit too, for that matter, because more often than not, the produce is picked fresh right out of the ground and immediately flash frozen. So that's going to be somewhat on the higher end of nutritional quality. So I have no problem with frozen veggies, especially, if they're not seasonally available. Like right now, I'm not going to buy strawberries at whatever, $8 a pint. I'm going to get frozen strawberries and just be fine with it. Yvette, I don't think you mentioned, if you did, I'm sorry, what is the correlation between coffee consumption and gut problems? I think that's just, it's not necessarily a correlation unless there's a sensitivity factor. So if you are somewhat prone to issues with caffeine, that could potentially cause disruption in your gut. There's a lot of conflicting info and research on coffee as well. There's like sometimes where we read things that's like, oh, don't drink this much, it's toxic. And other ones are, drink 6 cups a day and you can cure cancer. So I really think the jury is somewhat out on coffee consumption, just like anything that can be somewhat stimulating though, right? So there's the stimulation factor of caffeine that could be the issue with causing some issues with your gut. Okay, let's take a look here. Oh, thanks. Was that congratulations to me for quitting smoking? I think that's what that was. Thank you. Jude, are there certain testings that we can see if our gut health is okay or not? It's possible. Not everything is legit or well-researched. So if I'm remembering correctly, right now on TV, I've been seeing a lot of send in your feces and like we're going to do a bacteria testing on it. But I don't know if those things in themselves, if those companies are well tested and regulated. So the gut issue, it's kind of a tricky thing. So you might have to go to a gastroenterologist, like somebody who is specializing in gut health, and find out if there is some sort of test or bacterial thing that you can do just to make sure your gut health is okay. So you're not like depleted in any way. Okay, Alina, has there been any new research on why IBS happens? I would probably venture to say, I'm not entirely sure if this is correct, but the way that research and medicine tend to work is when we start hearing new things, then it's like, oh, everybody has that. So the second we start realizing, as I mentioned before with IBS in particular, it is a condition based on ruling out other things. So it's just like, well, I guess you don't have celiac and you don't have another gut issue. So you probably have IBS. So that just becomes like a secondary diagnosis that everybody now has. So I don't really know if technically everybody officially has it or they're just being diagnosed with it. And then that in itself can cause problems too, because if you, as a doctor, if you are just guessing what it might be, how can you possibly treat something that you don't know for sure is a thing? So again, that's just my opinion, but I think I might be a little bit right on that. Okay, yes. Okay, so let's take a look. Priscilla, you're welcome, you're welcome. I am quite literally right up against the almost 2 o'clock mark here. So I'm gonna share with everybody, if you wanna screenshot this, I'm also, as I said, recording this. This is all my information. Feel free to reach out to me, whether you are emailing me on my own business address or you're finding me through Lehman's directory. I'm happy to answer more questions. You can follow me and check me out. I'm quite literally on every single social media platform as Dish with Dina. I'm actually putting together a wellness retreat for next week. So for those of you who are following me and have seen me doing this, we're very heavily promoting a wellness retreat that we're doing on Saturday, December 4 and Sunday, December 5. You can come for free if you want to. It is a fundraiser, but we're not asking people to register as with a donation. You can show up for free if you want to. So I highly recommend come check us out. There's so much information there. We're going to talk about sleep and finance and meditation and physical activity. Is going to be quite a fun event to be involved in. So thank you everybody very much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to just stop sharing this so I can see everybody's faces. It's been such a pleasure meeting everyone and hanging out with you. Are there any other questions before I go? Any questions, comments, or feedback before I officially go?
Hi, Dina. Can you please, you said you're going to send this out, you recorded it, and you're going to send a link?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. This is very helpful. I really enjoyed it. Thank
I'm
you.
so glad. You're welcome. I'm going to send it actually through Nicole and the Lehman Wellness because they have the registrants. So I'll give them the link as soon as this stops recording, and then they'll just send that out. But I'll keep it myself too. So if you don't get it through them, you can always email me and I'll send you the link on that. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Alina, I'm so, taking care of your tummy. It'll thank you. It'll thank you. It is quite literally, as we've come to learn, very, very important. Very important. All right, everybody. On that note,